So the first transformer, the attention is all you need paper, was really about machine translation. I think that it's easiest to understand transformers kind of like in that sort of a context. Although obviously they're being used for lots of things, like in the chat, we're talking about natural language understanding, natural language generation, whatnot. So she showed an example of if you use an RN and LSTM, something like that, you're going to take in the different words one at a time, and you're going to build some sort of hidden representation, and it's a fixed size. So the real problem you have is that both the longer the sentence gets, the harder it is to cram all that into this fixed size, representation, but also the longer the sentence is, imagine she's the first word, it's been many, 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 many iterations since you saw the word she, and it's difficult to keep track of all of those different things by the time you get to the last word and you're outputting this context. They worked, but you can see why there would be a limitation on the ability to easily remember words that came a long time ago. So when we have attention, it's a much more expensive calculation, but when you're, say, outputting the third word over here, between your queries and keys, you have access to directly seeing the values of every word that came before, instead of having to have some context vector that's holding the meaning of all of those. So since you can directly access them, you no longer have that problem of words being a long time ago. Instead, the problem we have is if the sequence is very long, then it's very expensive because you are doing this query key computation stuff over a really, really long blue sequence in this case. All right, so I'm going to be showing you examples using Python, using PyTorch, and I wanted to build up some intuition. So I couldn't think of a way to give you good numeric examples with like an LSTM, but the idea is that you're packing everything into this vector. But I can show you some examples with CNNs, okay? So I'm assuming that most people who are doing machine learning have seen convolutional neural networks and seen computer vision stuff. If you don't, then like here, I have a link in the notebook. Here's a good article that talks about CNNs. And so most of the time, people have seen pictures like this. So if you have a 3x3 filter and you have an image, then basically it's gonna, plop this filter over the upper left corner of your image, and it's gonna, cell-wise, multiply the value in your filter versus the value in your pixels, and it's gonna sum them up. And then it's gonna move over, and it's gonna move over and do it again. It's gonna do it at every position in your image. Okay, so I think most people have seen this. One thing I just wanted to clarify is that a lot of the examples look like this, and the image is shown as having only one channel. So this is a 5x5 image, but this would be like a 5x5 black and white image, where you have ones for white and zeros for black. But most images that we're dealing with are not, and our intermediate representations are not that way. They have multiple channels. So here's a good diagram. This is from the Stanford CS231N course. And they're showing a 5x5 color image. And so it's actually got a red, green, and a blue channel. And so this quote unquote 3x3 filter is actually a 3x3 red, a 3x3 green, and a 3x3 blue. And if you look, you can see that the values for the red part of the filter are not identical to the green and the blue. So you can be looking for different things in the red channel versus in the blue channel. And if you want, you can even say, I'm looking for, in particular, let's say, some vertical pixels in the red, but some horizontal pixels in the blue. And that's the pattern that I'm looking for. And you can't necessarily always make it so that these filters will only find exactly the thing you're looking for, but that's the general gist of it, is that you can require whatever you want, and they can be required to be in all channels or only in particular channels or whatever. So I just wanted to share this because I'm going to do a sequence thing with CNNs, but unlike images, they're not going to be 2D CNNs. They're going to be 1D CNNs. Okay. And I'm going to do it all over words. In this case, I created a very tiny vocabulary. It's only 7 words. Okay. So we're only allowed to use the boy said he was good and now, only those words. And each of these words I'm going to embed into an 8-dimensional vector. So I have 8 floating point numbers. In these case, you can see the numbers are all like whole numbers, but they don't have to be. And I'm doing this in a very human readable way just to give you guys an example. I'm not saying that this is necessarily exactly what transformers look like under the hood. Okay. So if I pick 6 words and I make a sentence, I can make a sentence, the boy said he was good. And then if I turn this into numbers, then basically you're going to see that I have 6 words here, each of which is represented by 8 floating point numbers. Now, in this case, I've given you guys some labels that says the first number is going to be an indicator of, is this word a noun? And the second float is going to be, is this a pronoun? The third one, is this a verb? The fourth one, is this something other than a noun, a pronoun, or a verb? And I'm going to have some value numbers that I picked randomly that just sort of represent like, hey, different nouns are going to have different values here. And then I've got some other fields that I just randomly shove some numbers into. Okay. So again, not saying that this is exactly how things look in a transformer that you trained with gradient descent, but I wanted to make it simple so that you can have some intuition and say like, okay, if these were the weights, how would we look for a pattern? All right, let me just pause for a second. Any questions so far? You guys with me? All right.
Yep.
So thank you. So what I'm going to now look for is, we had like animal and it. Okay. So I'm going to look for the pattern to see, to find the word boy and the word he. Okay. And I'm going to find them 2 words apart. So right now you can see the boy is the second word and he is the fourth word. They're 2 words apart. How would I build a CNN filter that can find whenever there's a noun followed by a pronoun 2 words later? All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the weights for I'm going to have a filter of size 3. Okay. So this is a 1D CNN. And so it's going to be 3 wide, right? In 2-dimensional image filters, they're boxes, but this is just going to be 3. But again, we have to have the channel dimension. So my weights are actually going to be 3 by 8 in size. It's going to be 24 numbers. All right. I'm going to have it be all zeros except for I'm going to have a 10 for the first word if it's got values in that first floating point number. If you remember, the first floating point number says, are you a noun? I'm also going to have for the second floating point number, I'm going to put a weight of 10 there if it's the third word. Okay. And remember, the filter is going to move over. So it's going to look at the first 3 words and then words 2 through 4, then words 3 through 5, and then 4 through 6. And so it's going to try each of those positions. Okay. Now, in this case, I built a very, very simple filter where everything else is 0. And you can see, in fact, I'm completely ignoring floating point numbers 3 through 8 in the embedding. I only, at any point, care if there's a number in the first word, in the first float, and in the third word, in the second float, and everything else is 0.
Not everything is 0. There are a few ones.
Okay, sorry. So this
just
is
asking,
one,
was it
this is one
accidental?
filter here. Okay, this is 3 by 8. This is a filter. I actually am making 2 filters. So in the second filter, just because I didn't want people to be confused, because we only have one example, you don't know what to contrast it with. Okay, so this other filter you see has all zeros, it's ignoring the first 4 floats, and it's saying, let me grab the 5th float, which up here I called value 1. Okay. From the first word, and I'm going to grab value 2 from the third word. Okay. And so that's so this filter. And so then the 7th and 8th floats aren't used by either of these filters. All right. I know it might be a bit much. I'm just doing time check here, so I'm going a little bit fast. But you have the notebook, you can play with this, you can verify. Okay. So I apologize, I'm going a little bit fast here. But if I set these, then with this code, you can see that I've created a 1D convolution, okay, just a single one. And here are my parameters. You can see the first filter has 2 10s and everything else is 0. The second filter has 2 1s and everything else is 0. Let me send my sentence into our 1D CNN. And I don't have padding on, so the output's going to be shorter. And what you can see is it says in the first position where it's looking at words 1, 2, and 3, it output a 0 for the first filter. When it was looking at words 2, 3, and 4, it said bingo. I'm going to output a really large number because I found a noun in my first position and I found a pronoun 2 words later. And then it's got zeros when it's looking at words 3, 4, 5, and a 0 when it's looking at words 4, 5, 6. And if you want, you can verify that this second filter output numbers all the time, and it's outputting value 1 of the first word versus value 2 of the third word. And it's doing that for each position as the filter moves over. Okay, I know I went pretty fast there, but any questions about this example? All right, good. I'll take that as a positive. Hopefully it doesn't mean that there's anybody who's like so lost they don't even know what question to ask. And again, the cool thing is I've given you the notebook so you can actually make a copy and then you can play around. You can say, what if I put the 10 in a slightly different place? Or what if I change the way it's moved them around, did things like that. All right. So this is a filter which has successfully, in this first filter, the second filter, again, I did just for kicks, just for grins. It's not the one we care about. It successfully found noun followed by pronoun 2 words later. Okay. What do I give it a different sequence? What if I insert the word now? So now I have a 7-word sentence, but it's the boy now said he was good. Okay. And now boy and he are 3 words apart. Well, you might be able to guess that we're not going to get this nice 20 anymore. We are getting some signal because it's found a noun here and it's found a pronoun there. And so again, I'm not saying that this is exactly the kind of filter you would want to build in a word model, but you can see that it's sort of saying it's close. I've got a partial match here with the 20. That's a full match. And then if you passed these outputs to later layers, because right, like in CNNs, we usually have a fairly deep network with lots and lots of layers. You could imagine how those later layers could take certain patterns and match them and say, well, if I see this, if I see that, then it can combine those. Just like in a computer vision CNN, if it says, well, if I see horizontal lines here and vertical lines there, then that looks like a square to me. And if I see this, then that looks like a circle to me. And that looks like a triangle, whatever, those kinds of things, right? So this is the way that we could use 1D CNN filters to build a language model. And if you Google it, I mean, you can see there are CNN models out there, okay? And hopefully you can have some intuition that just like a vision one is looking for textures, looking for edges, looking for vertical, horizontal, things like that. And then the later layers aggregate those together into larger concepts, that you could take something that starts pretty small and ultimately start aggregating it into concepts like here's the subject of the sentence, here's the action that's happening, you know, stuff like that.
Ted, is this an alternative to the key value query framework, or is it
yes,
how do they fit together?
Yes, so this is technology that was available before transformers came about. Okay, so this is a predecessor alternative to query key value. And you can see that I can make it work. But if I wanted to be able to detect a noun and a pronoun 3 words apart, I'd need to have a second filter that's designed just for that. And I need another one to have them 4 words apart, and another one to have them 5 words apart. And then I'd need other filters for verbs, for adjectives. So you can see, like, you're going to need an awful lot of filters if you build it up this way. And again, computer gradient descent can probably do something in a more compact fashion where it's not just doing one little thing at a time. But you can imagine that, like, it's going to need an awful lot of filters, and it's going to need some smarts to decide how to match them up into bigger structures.
I
Does
see.
that
Thank
answer
you.
your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So if you understand my train of thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example using a transformer with these same sentences. And I'm going to show you that the transformer works better. Okay, like no surprise. Like I don't think that's really going to be a surprise to anybody. Okay, so here's our transformer, and zooming in, I'm just now talking about this query key value business that's happening in the attention mechanism. Okay, there's other stuff. We went through it a little bit quickly, but there's other stuff that's going on. Okay, so you have your different inputs, which are the different words in your sentence. They go in, you compute this attention, this weighted average of the things. Okay, and then one thing we haven't really talked about, but there is actually this linear projection that happens at the end. And then what happens with that final output? It gets added back to the input. So it's just like a ResNet. Okay. You looked in the big diagram, you'll see there's like a little circle with a plus here. And so the inputs go in here. They also pass straight through. And then this comes back and there's a plus, and they get added together. There's also a fully connected feed-forward network that's inside of a transformer. Not talking about what the role of that is. I'm really just talking about the role of attention right now. Okay, so let's go and try and match what we did with the CNN. Let's see if we can find a noun followed by a pronoun 2 words later. Okay, we have embedding size 8, and so our query key and value matrices are going to be 8 by 8 matrices. And what you're going to see here is that I've got some code where I initialize them with mostly zeros, and here is my query. It only has a single non-zero value. Okay, it's basically saying I, as a query, am only interested in finding pronouns. And so it's saying if I see a value in the second float of the embedding, I'm going to multiply it by 10. I'm going to boost it up, and I'm going to output that into my hidden vector of length 8. The key is going to say I only care about finding nouns, and so I'm going to, if I find a noun that has a floating point number, a value in the first floating point number, I'm going to multiply it by 10 to boost it up, and I'm also going to output it in the first float of my length 8 hidden dimension. And then what happens in the attention mechanism is that all the query outputs and all the key outputs are dotted together in order to compute those scores. So from the perspective of a given word, such as he, okay, the query just comes from he. All right, so we're only thinking about a single defined query value with respect to one word. But the keys, we're comparing it to all 6 words in our input sequence. And so we're going to compute 6 different keys. And in this case, the keys are going to say, do I see a noun? Do I see a noun? Do I see a noun? And it's going to do that for all 6 spots. And then we're going to dot them together. So when we do that, and we, so here's our sequence again. The boy said he was good. If I run this, okay, sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. So our input shape is going to look like this, okay? Remember, it's 6 words, each length 8 embedding. And in self-attention, we pass the exact same input into both the Q, the K, and the V. These are going to get multiplied by the weight matrices, and they're all identical. This is why it's called self-attention. Don't have time to get into it, but if you look at like the decoder in the transformer actually has a cross attention, and that's where the K and the V come from the encoder side, but the Q is coming from the decoder side. If you read about like these diffusion models that are generating images, DALL-E 2, Stable Diffusion, they're using text descriptions to generate images. And so what happens is the image data is going into the query, but the text that says, I want to see an astronaut riding a horse, that goes into the queries and the values in that cross attention. But in this case, we're doing self-attention just using text. So all 3 of them get the exact same data, all right? And you can see that this is the same numbers that I had in my nice, pretty pandas data frame. So we're going to pass it in, and I'm going to say, what is the attention? Okay. And what's going to happen is that in the fourth word, the word he, it's going to say, my attention is 100% on the second word, the word boy. All right. Now, it's doing attention scores, for every position. And so because the rule isn't matching at all, it's just saying I'm dividing my attention 1/6 evenly across all the words. But when I find a pronoun, then I'm saying laser bam. What should I pay attention to? I'm paying attention to the word boy. So this rule worked by having just those two tens, one in the query, one in the key. I was able to build a, again, hand-made up example that can find a pronoun and a noun, and boom, here's my attention. I apologize, I'm going fast, but any questions about this example? All right, so now we had a problem with the CNN where when I inserted a new word, that broke my filter, and I would need a different filter to find words to find, the he and the boy 3 words apart. What happens if I take my sequence with the word now added and I pass it in? I don't need to change any of my weights. It's smart enough to say now, for the 5th word, I'm going to put all of my attention on the word boy again. So you can see, because the way this query key matching works, it doesn't matter where the word is that you want to match. So with these weights that I have right now, anywhere the word boy appeared, before, after, 2 words apart, 5 words apart, 100 words apart, I would get 100% attention from the word he to the word boy, just the way I wrote this rule. Now, in reality, maybe you actually need more context than that. But again, I just wanted to show you that here is how we can do pattern matching using this attention mechanism. All right. Questions? I know I'm going super fast for time, but okay. So this was just showing us the attention scores. But you might be asking, what the heck is it actually going to output? You just said that it's attending to that word, right? There was a question in the chat. Hey, I have to do an output. So one of the things that I did when I set the weights for this particular attention module is I used identity matrices for both the value and the output I don't know what to call it, a transformation projection matrix, which means they're leaving things unchanged. So whatever our input is going to be grabbed as is for the values. And then once we attend to it, we're going to output that again unchanged. So what that means is if I'm putting 100% of my attention for the word he on the word boy, then I should basically be spitting out all the values from the word boy in position 5, despite the fact that the 5th word was he, not the word boy. And so what you can see here is in our input, the word boy is this 100060700 800 thing. And in our output, where the word he was, I'm outputting exactly that in position 5. So with this matching rule, I have managed to copy all of the numbers from the embedding for the word boy into the 5th position where the word he is. So just want to show, like, that's one of the things that you can do with attention. And you could maybe do this with LSTMs, with CNNs. But again, this rule is very flexible and it would work. It would copy this value of boy no matter where the word boy was. It doesn't depend on its position. Now, if we wanted it to depend on position, the way these language models are built, they usually have not only the words, but they have additional numbers that are there. That's the positional information. And so the attention mechanism could also pay attention to the, I was just using the first float, the second float, which said, are you a noun, are you a pronoun? They could also use the data that says either absolute or relative how far where are these words? And so if you include those in your rule, then you can specifically say, for example, I'm only looking for a pattern where this is the word immediately before me, or things like that, if you really wanted to. All right, I apologize, we're over time, but I'm gonna go through quickly this last example. So single-headed attention, generally fairly, well, I don't know if it's easy to understand, but you can wrap your head around it. It gets more complicated when you have multiple heads. So in this case, I've got an example where I set up some weights and I now have 2 attention heads. In the standard technique, what you do is your hidden dimension is shrinks inversely proportional to the number of heads. So if you have 8 heads, then the hidden dimension is going to be 1/8 the side of your full embedding. So in this case, my word embeddings are 8 floats. And so my queries and keys are now going to go into a 4 float space. So you'll see now the shape of my queries and key weight matrices has changed. This first one is just like before. The query is looking at pronoun, the key is looking at noun, and I'm doing something a little bit different here in the values. I'm copying sort of the last 4 floats. The second attention head, I'm, instead of looking for pronoun and a noun, you'll see that the query and the key vectors are identical. They're both just looking for pronoun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this rule is going to match when I find a pronoun, and it's going to look at itself. It's no longer, this one's not going to attend to the word boy. He is going to attend only to he, and I'm copying the last 4 floats from the word embedding. What's different here is now I'm not using identity for the output weights. Instead, what you'll see is one of the things I'm doing is I have -1s over here for this output 2, and so what I'm doing is I'm actually going to do -1 times whatever the value is for the pronoun. And what you're going to see is that I'm going to then, in my output, I'm going to be combining the 2 heads. So the first head is going to say, copy some values from the word boy. And then the second head is actually going to say, put in -1 times my current value. And so what's happening is when those get added back into our data stream, the -1 times my current value is literally clearing the register. So it's taking whatever values were in those positions and it's wiping them out to be zeros. And then that's going to allow the other head to write whatever value it wants in there. So when we do all of this, you'll see here, here are my attention weights. So again, the first head attended to boy, and the second head, he attended to itself. And then here's my input. And then what you'll see is in my output, I have this 744. And when I sum it with my input, what I've done is I've successfully copied the 777 and the 888, and I've overwritten where it was 33 and 44. I didn't add it to the 33 and the 44. I made sure to actually subtract those out and clear them before copying so that I get an exact copy of the 777 and the 888. All right. And I have a reference here. Where is it? It's a pretty long read, but there's this really amazing transformer circuits work by Anthropic, and so you can follow that work. But what they've said is, we've seen hints that some neurons and attention heads may perform a kind of memory management role, including clearing the residual stream dimensions set by other layers by reading information and then writing out -1 times whatever they read in. Pretty freaking amazing. And so then I just have a couple more cells where you can see the first attention head. It's copying the 777 and the 888. And it's got some average values in these other ones. The second attention head is doing -33, -44 to clear out those. But these other values are actually -1 times. So you see like this 119 and 136. This is negative 119, negative 136. And so those completely cancel out. And when you add those together, you just get all zeros except for I wanted to copy these numbers into this spot such that in my final output, I have managed to copy the 777 and the 888. And so if I use slightly different weights, I could have copied other numbers. I just chose to copy these two to give you an example of how to do it. So I apologize for going rather quickly, but I hope this gives you some intuition in terms of the queries and the keys. You can write rules that are position dependent if you want, but you have the extra power that you can write position independent rules that will match things like a pronoun to a noun, or like it to things like animal and stuff like that. And then in addition to just having attention, there is this value matrix that allows you to decide which subsets of the values you want to pull and to optionally transform them in addition to just merely copying them. And since we're using this in ResNet fashion, that enables some other more powerful things other than simply just outputting something. We can do these kind of memory management things like clearing registers, adding things in, and doing stuff like that. So pretty fast. But again, hopefully if there's things that you were interested, you can take these examples and you can tweak the weights, you can tweak the input words, and you can see just exactly, you can play around and see what kind of attention scores, what kind of outputs you would get if you gave it slightly different inputs. All right. We're past time, but that was the blitz. But I wanted to cover that because I feel like there's a lot of good blogs that show you the architecture of the transformer, but don't necessarily give you the intuition of what kinds of things would you do if you had that architecture. So this is where I wanted to show you how you do the matching and how you can do sort of like memory management and cool, other kinds of arithmetic. So
that's great. Real quickly, if we start to mess around with this notebook and have questions, where should we go? Is there a Discord channel or something? I forget.
Yeah. Ryan, can you post the San Diego Machine Learning Slack link, please? Yeah. So feel free to post on there. I don't think Houston ML has one yet, but absolutely. And Ryan and I are on there constantly. So again, happy to do further discussion. If you have questions about papers, blogs, or about the notebook or anything like that, feel free to ping us.
Thank you.
All right. So then the next session in the Transformers United series, Yan is going to post on Houston Machine Learning. I'll try to remember to cross-post it so the people in San Diego see, but if you're interested in it and you're not already, you should join Houston Machine Learning so that you for sure get the notifications when Nan posts the next session in a few weeks.